Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you here today. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to the program. And for those who have lived through my other episodes and are returning listeners, thank you very much. Glad to have you. I have accolades to thank you for because of your listening and also our great guests. We have cracked into the top 10 fastest growing podcasts on the planet, which is pretty exciting. We have listeners in 32 countries, 6 continents. And if we could figure out a way to market to penguins, we'd have them on 7 continents. What we're excited to do in our show each day is to share great human stories and meet interesting people who've done amazing things. And today, that's no different. If you do not like the podcast platform you're on, that's okay. There's 23 different podcast distribution points where the show is carried. Also on the show website at rexandrewshow.com. and also on social media. But I always steer people to come back to the website because on the website we have profiles and links and information about our guests, their stories, things they're working on, both the previous guests, current guests, and the ones that are upcoming in our schedule. And we roughly have about 30 in queue all the time coming up with a lot of great stories. So with no further ado, thank you for tuning in. And oh, don't forget, I am a well-dressed beggar, so I will beg you for those 5 stars. So if you like the show, you like what we're doing, please give us those stars. We appreciate that. That helps us with the rankings and visibility in the podcast markets. Okay, today I got a great story. As a parent, I'm excited to share this story and the message from it. My guest here today is a speaker, an author, and got an incredible story to share with us today. He's overcome one of the worst parent nightmares you could ever imagine, and I'll have him talk about that. And through this tragedy, he has become a leading advocate of educating people about the dangers of binge drinking. So glad to hear his story today. But in another way, I'm not, because nobody should have to go through what Barry's gone through. So welcome to the show this afternoon, Barry Adkins. Barry, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Rex?
It's a pretty good day. We're beautiful skies here and just outside of Boulder today, and spring's almost here, so we're enjoying it.
Yes.
Fantastic. So, Barry, you've got your book out there, website, social media. I hear you do most of your stuff on Facebook. So could you tell us how to find you on Facebook so that way people can follow along if they're listening and multitasking today?
It's pretty easy to do. It's Facebook/Kevin's Last Walk, all one word.
Okay.
And the website is also kevinslastwalk.com.
Kevin's Last Walk. All right. So here's what we're like to do, Barry. We'll learn a little bit about you before we get into the story, because your story is amazing and compelling. But I want to help the audience understand a little bit about you. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Siblings? What was your life like? And then I want you to, kind of help us with some of that, so we get a picture of who you are as a person. And then I want you to hopscotch up to this tragic event that has allowed you to share your story and become an advocate of the dangers of binge drinking. So if you could, Barry, give us a little bit of history. Where did you grow up, raised, a little bit of background?
Sure, Rex. So I guess the best way to describe me before I give you the details is that I'm not your prototypical author or speaker. I never had any desire to do anything like that. I'm more of an introvert than anything else. Stay at home on the weekends, don't really go anywhere. But life changed for me on July 10th of 2005. Prior to that, I grew up in Montana. Kind of an interesting thing. I grew up in Montana. I ended up going to Alaska and fishing on commercial fishing boats, both Prince William Sound and Kodiak Island, prior to Exxon Valdez.
Okay.
I moved to Arizona to go to school, and that was 40 plus years ago, and here I still am.
Okay, fantastic. So you're down there in the heat.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yes, unfortunately.
No, yeah, I'd love to talk to you about Alaskan fishing stories sometimes. I'd spent some time up there and
Yeah. Oh yeah.
love Kodiak.
It was you look back on those things, Rex, and you say, wow, I got to go fish on a commercial fishing boat. This is all well ahead of Alaska's deadliest catch. So
Oh yeah, well ahead of that.
It was the Wild West back then.
Well, I did some of that in the summer of 1982. I'm 55, so yeah, that was a different day back then. It was nowhere near what they showed on the TV show. So it was a little different than that for sure. So
right.
All right, fantastic. So yeah, just Montana, raised up there. Were you ranch land? Were you in the city? Were you rural? What did your lifestyle look like before you moved to Arizona?
I was a little bit of both. I lived out in the country for, I don't know, 8-10 years, something like that. And then we ultimately ended up moving into Kalispell, Montana. It's up in the northwest corner by Glacier Park.
Yep.
Beautiful place to live.
Yes.
If you could live on scenery, it's the place to be, but it's tough to make a living up there. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The length of the Rockies is a beautiful thing, but not always the best places to make that 6-figure income. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. Understand you end up getting married and having a son and all that. Can you give us a little snapshot of all that?
So I had 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son. And the snapshot of that is I ended up getting divorced in 93.
Mm-hmm.
And I had custody of all 3 of the kids. So they lived with me. And then I remarried on, and you're going to like this, Rex. I got married on January 1st of 2000.
Okay.
So I know exactly how long I've been married all day, every day.
That's not
And I
bad.
get my anniversary off every year, man.
That's right. That's right. That's a good time to do that. You know, I have a son that was born in October of 2000, so I always know how old he is. That's an easy one. But gosh, not only do you get it off, but it's easy to remember. You know, I'll tell you this, I'm pretty sure at this point in time, Barry, you have no excuses if you ever forgot your anniversary.
That's exactly right. You know, there's something wrong if I forget my anniversary.
Yeah, or what year it is, because I always had to sit back and think of the math and the month, and I get in trouble sometimes, you know, because after a while.
Yes. Well, you do that with your birthdays for kids, right? It's like, okay, this one was born here. And Kevin was born in 87. So.
Okay, 1987. All right. So fast forward up a little bit here. This is really a story that brought you to where you are today with the message you share. This is a tragedy that involved your son, Kevin. So let's go there and pre-play a little bit about where he was and what things are going on, and just kind of help us with the story.
Well, this story is, if somebody had written a book like this, you would just say, well, that's a pretty absurd story. But basically what happened was Kevin graduated from high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to tell this part of it. He wanted to buy a truck. So, of course, I told him, well, if I'm going to co-sign a loan, you got to have 3 months worth of insurance payments and car payments before I'm going to sign that loan, right?
Right.
He comes up with the money. I go down. He ends up buying it from a dealership, which I know everybody has kind of different thoughts about that. I was dreading the process. I go in there, and the first thing the financial guy says to me is, how about some life insurance? And being the crusty old dude that I am, I said, look, man, I don't need any life insurance. I'm not here for life insurance, and I don't need any. And he said, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about your son.
Mm.
And I'm that guy. I said, look, he doesn't need life insurance. He's 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But I was wrong. He did die. And so he moved out. He bought the truck. He decided he wanted to move out. The day he moved out, they threw a housewarming party for him. He was 18 years old. They threw a housewarming party for him. He got very drunk. He passed out. The people at the party Figured no big deal, just lay in his bed on his side in case he vomits. But his buddy Craig that was there with him kept going back in to check on him, and around 4 o'clock in the morning, calls started coming into 911. And the first ones were difficulty breathing. Next ones were not breathing. And my son died alone in the hospital while I slept peacefully in my bed.
Oh my goodness. So 4 a.m. is when the first 911 calls came in?
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Whew, that's tough. So when did you get alerted? When did you get that terrible phone call?
So the next morning, it was Sunday morning, my wife and I are sitting around drinking coffee, talking about what we're going to do or not do that day. And the doorbell rings. And we're looking at each other because who's here at 8:30 on a Sunday morning?
Yeah.
And I open the door and I see 2 police officers and somebody in plain clothes standing at my front door.
Wow.
Should have been a bid reg flag, right?
Yeah.
It should have been a red flag, but I'm that guy. I actually joked with them as they came in, thinking it had to have something to do with a dog or a parked car or something.
Sure.
They didn't laugh at any of my jokes.
Oh, no.
And one of the officers came in and stood in front of this brown chair that Kevin had sat in a couple weeks before and talked about how his life was finally beginning. He said there'd been an accident and that your son is dead. And we have a number of children. So we said, who is it? And they said it was Kevin. Rex, they handed me his driver's license. There's just something pretty final about it when a police officer hands you your child's driver's license, because until that instant in time, you're holding out hope.
Yeah.
This is all just a big mistake, man.
I can't even imagine that moment. Was your wife in the room with you? Were you alone?
She was. We were both just sitting there drinking coffee, and it just, we didn't know why they were there, right? And we finally asked what had happened, and they said that the probable cause of death was alcohol poisoning. We found out later that was indeed what happened. His blood alcohol content was 0.36%.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Ooh. Yes, it was one of those kind of parties. But it's interesting because the coroner, when she called, said that she's seen as low as 0.24% kill specifically teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the message is, if somebody's passed out, you really don't know how much trouble they're in.
That's right.
You need to get them to help and apologize later if it was overkill, right?
Now, let's see. So drinking age, this was in Arizona, right?
Yes.
Okay. Drinking age in Arizona was 21 at the time, right?
Correct.
Okay. Because when I was a kid, way back in the day, drinking age in Colorado when I grew up was 18. Now that was for
me as well.
Yeah, for 3-2 beer. So if you wanted to get drunk on 3-2 beer, you got to drink a lot of beer, but you could accomplish it. It was not a hard task. I spent way too much time at college parties and stuff. And because it was so low at 18, it was very easy to have an older brother or sister or buddy or something that you could get access to alcohol. My father was a highway patrolman, so he always said, I'll let you drink all the beer you want, but you're going to do it at home, and I'm taking everybody's keys. Well, that kind of took all the fun out of that. Who wants to hang out with dad? But so when I went off to college, I did quite a bit of drinking. I think when I stopped drinking, the Coors stock price went down. But so I certainly understand. I used to tell friends, well, I was going to be pre-med, but I thought that football, girls, and drinking beer was a better major. So
yeah, exactly.
So did you suspect?
We're all young at some point.
Yeah, we're all young. Did you suspect, or did you know that Kevin had been drinking before? Was this his first trip to the rodeo on this binge? Or?
Well, he there were a couple times that I kind of suspected something. but yeah, I don't know. We really never had any problems with him, to be
Okay.
honest. I mean, we just didn't have any problems with him. But as time went on, his friends told me that because I had custody of the kids,
Mm-hmm.
and he was going over to his mom's some, but then when he got in high school, he kind of stopped going over there. Then in his senior year, he kind of started going over there on the weekends, right? And I honestly, again, I'm kind of a naive guy. I'm kind of oblivious to a lot of things, but I thought, well, that's really cool that he's going over there and spending time with his mom and doing all that. Well, it turns out they were basically doing what your dad said, that she would let them bring whatever they wanted over there, or whoever they wanted, and they would go drink over at her house.
Mm. Wow.
So on a sample of one, it doesn't work.
No, it does not. It does not. Being a father of 5, I know that for sure. It's way too many. And fast forward to today's days, Colorado was the first state to have both legalization for medical and then recreational marijuana. We knew of people who literally were parents doing the same thing, throwing pot parties for the kids. And boy, did my opinion had changed to that in a big time by when I was adult. And even my father backed off that approach, when my younger siblings come up. But no, it doesn't work. In fact, it just enables them. So, wow.
Yeah.
So his mother has a little bit of culpability in creating that environment, I would assume.
I never went there,
Okay.
Rex.
Yeah.
There's plenty of blame to go around, including me. But I tended to look to the future. I can't change what happened in the past.
Right.
And maybe that's part of why I've kind of survived this is early on, my wife, Bev, and I, we just agreed that we're not going to play any blame games here with anybody.
Nope.
The cops had been to this house several times, Rex.
Oh.
And busted up parties and never arrested anybody, didn't do anything about it. Sure, there's some responsibility there, but I've just stayed away from that and just focused on just telling the story and letting the audience decide what do you want to take away from this.
Sure. Well, it's easy. And I know that, I've never experienced your situation of ever losing a child or even having even one seriously injured. I've been, knock on wood, my youngest is 18, and I've been very blessed to have a lot of good health and kids who avoided troubles. But, we all have free agency and choice. And so ultimately, I would think you would probably come down to youthful indecisions.
Yeah, and one of the things, while we're on that topic, one of the things I tell audiences is that the 2 most important decisions you're ever going to make are about drugs and alcohol. It isn't even close. We all know story after story after story about primarily athletes who did what? They threw it away on one of those 2 things. And you need to educate yourself as if your life depends upon it, because it does, right? I mean, those are important decisions. Where you go to school is important, yes, but those 2 are by far the most important decisions you're ever going to make.
Well, you're flirting with life and death, and it doesn't have to be a situation where you have alcohol poisoning or drug overdose. It can be in the form of a car accident. It can be for bad judgment with weapons. I mean, you get under the influence of anything, and oh my goodness, you're flirting with danger.
Yes.
Wow. So I like I said, I can't even imagine how that news came and the finality of them handing his driver's license to you. I bet you were just floored.
I was. It's a moment in time that it's such a defining moment when they hand you your child's driver's license. And the world that you knew before that instant in time is gone. You will never be the same person that you were before that officer hands you your child's driver's license. You're never going to get back to it.
Well, just sitting here thinking this through and listening to this, I mean, it's not like you even had the opportunity to hold his hand as he passed or anything like that. I mean, you were fast asleep and he exited the planet.
I was sound asleep in my bed. You know, that day when he left, the interesting thing he did that day, because you remember some of the details, but his buddy Craig came over to help him move out, and they threw a bed, a TV, and a dresser in his truck. And then he came in, and his clothing system was a pile of clean, wrinkled clothes on the floor.
Yeah,
that was
exactly.
how you know that drill. But he put jeans in the drawer to de-wrinkle, and he came in and said something I've never forgotten. He said, "I'm not going to take my toothbrush with me. I'll be back tomorrow and get it."
Mm.
And I just walked outside with him like I normally do and watched him drive away. And as I was thinking about it this morning, I said, "Bye, I love you." But I didn't say goodbye.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So, you ended up, what was next? Gosh, I'm just struggling because I'm just so, being a parent of 5, I can't even imagine losing one of my kids. It's just, I'm 55. I've had great success in business and careers and all that stuff. But, my biggest accomplishment in our world is my children, as far as
Right.
becoming good kids
Right.
and stuff. So.
Well, it was, it's a difficult time. You have to decide, what are you going to do with the memorial? What are you going to do with your child's remains? Are you going to speak at his memorial? And actually, I spoke at his memorial, and if you don't mind, I'll read a brief excerpt of what
Sure.
I said at his
Absolutely.
memorial. Many of you have asked, what can I do to help? Well, here's what you can do. Each of you can make something very good come from this. I don't know if it's one something very good or 1,000 something very goods. It might be a tiny something very good or a huge something very good. But I am convinced that something very good can come from this. I don't know who, what, when, where, or how, but I know that it will. I ask each of you to find that something very good and make it happen. That is what you can do for us and for Kevin.
Well, that's a great place to start. You decided to do some good, and was it at the service? Was it before that? What was the timeline before when you decided to make your own journey around this?
Basically, I would describe it like this. So I had to go pick up his ashes. We decided to have him cremated.
Mm-hmm.
And you go down to the funeral home, you walk in there, they've got nice music playing and pictures on the wall. They took me into this nice office, set me down in a big leather chair with a big desk in front of me. The funeral director walks in and sets an urn down in front of me. An urn that holds the remains of the kid that I burped, changed his diapers. I coached his baseball, soccer, football. I taught him to shoot a gun and swing a golf club. Everything that was left of him was sitting in an urn in front of me.
Wow.
And one of the things I knew at that point was that I didn't want to be a victim.
No.
Because the world doesn't need any more victims. We got plenty of them already.
Yeah, we're overstocked.
The world needs people who take, the world needs some people who take something bad and they make something good come from it. And that's basically where the idea to get out and tell the story was, because I thought, well, what would I want somebody else to do if it happened to their kid? And for me, it was just tell the story. Just get out and tell the story.
So you made a decision sitting right there when you're in the funeral home, when you're picking up his urn, and you went on a journey. And we're not just talking about an emotional journey. You went on a physical journey. Tell us about how that came about, and then let's start that journey.
Okay. So we wrestled with what to do with his ashes, right? I mean, once things kind of, the dust had settled, we were like, okay, what are we going to do here? As I said, I grew up in Montana. Kevin had been to Montana a number of times, talked about wanting to move there someday and buy a ranch. So we decided to take his ashes to Montana. I suppose the normal thing to do would be to put them in your car and drive there. But I decided to put them in my backpack and walk there. Not to raise money, because here's the other dirty little secret about this. There is no money in the world that'll fix the hurt. It doesn't exist.
No.
But to tell the story, because it's something I can guarantee you don't want to go through.
So
I suppose you want to know how I came up with the idea to walk to Montana.
yeah, I do. That's
well,
because I'm telling you, hopping in the truck might be a little easier.
Yeah, seems like it would be. There was a fairly long movie. I think they made it a mini series called Lonesome Dove.
Yep.
And that's where the idea to do it came from, because Kevin's favorite movie was Lonesome Dove. In the movie, Tommy Lee Jones does it on horseback. I initially thought about doing that, but I figured I'd probably never get there. So that's why it kind of morphed into walking there and just stopping and telling the story along the way. But Lonesome Dove is where it came from.
Okay. Well, this wasn't exactly a week-long event. How long did it take you to get up there? Now, I'm assuming when you made that decision, you probably had some idea, but then there's always the idea and then what happens. So, did you plan this out? Obviously, you weren't working at the time, or tell us a little bit about the logistics, because that's quite an endeavor. That's quite a sacrifice.
Well, I could probably talk for about 2 hours about it, but suffice to say, I was working. My employer, Rhodian Shores, kept me on the payroll. It took me about 4 months to do it. Wow. Another organization by the name of notmykid.org, they sponsored it.
Oh, wow.
And they set up a lot of the speaking engagements, because you can imagine they wanted me to give them a schedule, Rex. Okay, when are you going to be in this town?
Yeah.
So I had to come up with a guess. I ended up averaging about 90 miles a week, and I didn't have a single sick day or weather day. It took about 4 months. I had a little bit of margin built into that, because I figured there was going to be days I wasn't going to make it. And there was days I didn't feel like walking, but I always figured I might feel worse tomorrow. I better walk today. That was kind of my mindset, was if I can possibly do it, I'm going to do it.
Wow. So they set up these engagements. So it wasn't like you just walked a straight line up there or followed a single highway. You probably had to hop all over the place to get to these speaking engagements. Was that the case?
Yeah, we knew the route, and most of them were, right along the route there. To be clear, I did not sleep under a bridge every night. My wife, Bev, met me about every 3 miles, and, she would take the truck up 3 miles and park and wait for me, and then we would mark the spot. She actually has this book full of all of the mile markers, everything, because she was keeping very close track of where I was and when we were there and all of that kind of stuff. So she did just a great job of keeping everything in line. And no, you need to leave now, because it's going to take us an hour to get to that school. So you got to stop here. We'll come back here tomorrow, kind of stuff.
So what a blessing to have not only your employer continue to keep you on the payroll while you were doing this, but also to get some sponsorship from the other organization, Not My Kid. That's, wow, how fortuitous is that?
Yeah, it's, Rex, I did the walk in 2007, and now I've got, almost 14 years of hindsight on this. And I look back on it, I got nothing, Rex. I don't know it wasn't me. It was the good Lord. There was no, because it just all fell into place. It really did.
Wow. So how many times did you speak to folks?
I was afraid you'd ask me that. I did not ask my bride. Oh, I don't know, probably 40 or 50 times. I think it was somewhere around 12,000 kids or something along the way. Those kinds of numbers. It was groups as small as 20 or 30 and as large as 1,000.
Wow.
And everything in between. And there was a lot of cool things that happened along the way. And I'll tell you, one of them was I spoke at the high school in Flagstaff, and I was up north of Flagstaff, between Flagstaff and Page. Mm-hmm. And people stopped all the time, right, to talk to me. And this guy, I see the brake lights come on, so I know I'm going to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And this guy comes up to me, and he says, "Are you the guy that spoke at Flagstaff High School last week or a couple of days ago?" I said, "Yeah, I did." He goes, "I just wanted you to know that for the first time, his son came home and talked to him about it and told him the story."
Mm.
And so it opened up that dialogue. And easy walking after that, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
That's cool.
So you left the Phoenix area and went clear up to, where did you find, what was the ending point of your destination?
Kalispell.
Kalispell, wow. So yeah, it wasn't like you started in the southern part of Montana. You went clear up. So how many miles? How many miles was it up there?
Well, not my kid had it as 1,400 miles. I think it's closer to 1,300, because when you come back to logistics, in Utah, the shortest route would have been to walk up I-15.
Sure.
But Utah would not guarantee me that the highway patrol would not kick me off of the freeway.
Oh my goodness.
So I ended up having to go over around I-15. So it was a little longer. So it was probably 1,300 miles, because freeways really weren't an option. I decided I'm not going to walk on a freeway, even if it is a very rural freeway, because they said, well, we might let you walk and we might not.
Well, the crazy part is I've got kids. I have kids that went to school at Cedar City down there at the South End. I got kids that went to school up at Utah State and in between. And oh my goodness, I-15 is the Autobahn statewide. I mean, that traffic's running 85, 90 all the time. So.
Oh yeah, it is now. Yeah.
Yeah.
We went up through Kanab.
Okay.
If anybody's familiar with that, Kanab, and I think Richfield, and up that way, kind of 89. Yeah. All the way, you can take it all the way into Salt Lake City.
Yeah, 89 does go all the way up there. And actually, to be honest with you, that's a prettier walk.
It's a beautiful walk.
Yeah, that's a beautiful area over
there.
Lots
of little towns.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have lots of little towns up there along that way, and not near the traffic and that kind of stuff. Lots of good country folks out that way.
Traffic is always an issue when you're walking on the highway, though.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I walked against traffic because I wanted to see what's coming at me. I did not wear headphones. I wanted to be able to hear what was going on around me, because you just never know when somebody's not going to see you.
Exactly. Now, did you end up wearing out a pair of shoes or two?
I went through about 4 pairs of shoes. Yeah.
4 pairs of shoes. Wow.
Yeah. I only had snow a few days. I left in February because we had to be able to hit schools, right? I couldn't do it in the summer because I wanted to be able to go to schools. So we left here in February. So obviously snow and rain was an issue at times, although never too bad, never more than a few inches of snow on the ground and snowy days, but nothing where you got to get your snowshoes out, like maybe in Boulder occasionally.
Wow. So when you were doing this, you were running about 12, 15 miles a day, or walking about 12, 15 miles a day, approximately?
Well, it was kind of interesting because in the beginning, when I trained, what my thought process was that I'd walk 5 days a week. I'd go 15, 20, 15, 20, 15.
Yeah.
right? Take a day off, 2015, and then another day off. But I found those days off weren't really helping.
Yeah.
And those 20-mile days just really kind of ground on me a little bit.
I bet.
So I ended up just walking 14 miles a day every day, just get up every day.
Yep.
And the thing about it is, the nice thing about it was I knew exactly what I had to do every day.
Okay.
I'm going to walk from here to here.
Okay. And then, assuming what you said earlier, you marked those spots, went and, slept at a hotel and stuff, and then came back to those spots and started over, right?
We did. And kind of some funny stories there. There was a bridge there in northern Arizona. It was there's a couple narrow bridges, but Bev had said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't I drive you across the bridge, and then you can walk back and forth there a few times to equal the distance across the bridge.
Sure.
I considered that rationalizing. So I just waited till I couldn't see any cars coming, and I ran across the bridge. The bridge is probably a couple hundred yards across there or something. So I just booked it across the bridge. And even parking lots, she would say, well, you can take off from here. I'm like, no, I was at the other end of the parking lot. We're starting down there.
Starting down there.
Because I want to make sure I covered every step of it.
So how heavy is an urn in your backpack?
It was probably between 12 and 14 pounds.
Okay. I'm assuming you had
that,
water with you and all those plenty of things, plus your wife was tagging you along about every 3-4 miles.
Yeah, I carried. I drank a lot of something called Cytomax or Cetomax. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but I had that. I ate a lot of Cliff Bars. Actually in the book I talked about it. I really have never been able to eat a Cliff Bar since, because I didn't want to eat anything that was complicated to eat, because there's no bathrooms out there.
No,
right?
No.
So I stuck with very simple things during the day, and I ate a lot of Cliff Bars in 4 months. Let's put it that way.
Wow. So, knowing the heaviness of your heart, were there still some days out there where you kind of like, what am I doing? I mean, having those thoughts of, okay, have I proved my point? What am I doing? Or were you just totally focused?
Well, I'd love to tell you that, I didn't second guess myself. I mean, I had people, relatives, try to talk me out of this before I did it, including my employer. There was a lot of people who said, no. Why don't you just go walk for a week and then see how you feel about it next year?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, this is what my heart's telling me to do. This is what I'm going to do. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but this is what I'm going to do. As far as getting out there and wondering what I got myself into, absolutely. I wasn't even the Flagstaff before I had that conversation with myself, because Phoenix is about 1,100 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Flagstaff, where I was at the time, is probably 7,600 feet.
Yep.
And there's a lot of up and down in between that. It wasn't just 6,000 feet up. It was probably twice that at least. And I remember on a cold, snowy, rainy day thinking, what have I gotten myself into here?
Yeah.
What? I'm not even a Flagstaff yet. And I was whipped. And that's kind of where I started thinking about doing the 7 days a week thing. So I didn't have to grind that 20-miler out every other day kind of thing. But I don't think you'd be human if you didn't second guess yourself.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Of course, I definitely second guessed myself. But the good news is, the further I went, you get into a routine. You understand what's coming each day. You know exactly what you need, and when you need it, and that kind of stuff.
So, not knowing your faith and those types of things, were there moments of clarity in this, that were touching your heart or your spirit, or, tell me a little bit about that.
Do you want to hear the faith part of it?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the phrase, something very good will come from this.
Mm-hmm.
Those aren't my words.
Right.
So a couple days after Kevin passed away, I was laying in bed, and I felt what I can only describe as a presence in the room. Look, I'm just a regular dude, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to try to describe this as simply as I can.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like there was a presence in the room. There was a light I had never seen before, and I haven't seen since. The message was clear. Something very good would come from this, and Kevin didn't suffer. Why this happened to me, I don't know. There's lots of Christians out there that are much better Christians than I am.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I can think of is God knew I was in trouble when he sent the cavalry. And that's where the phrase, something very good will come from this. I still read that. I read it this morning at a session I did this morning.
You know, I talk all the time. That's kind of what I do. And for this story to take my words away, that's a pretty heavy story because I just think about my own children and being a parent.
It takes my breath away too. And again, I'm just an old hillbilly from Montana, Rex.
Yeah.
It isn't like I was just up front in the front pew at church or a pastor or anything like this. And this is why part of what, but I always say, well, why would God choose me to do this? And I'm a happily married man. You know what my wife's answer, Bev's answer is, the Bible does teach us that God chooses the unimpressive to do his work.
Sure.
Right. And, well, you got me there, dear.
Wow, what a journey. So did you have a spot in mind to spread his ashes once you got to Kalispell? Or were you going to just figure that out? Or were you going to figure that out when you got there?
Well, we had some land up there that we spread his ashes on. Actually, we actually took him to a lake close by the land that we have and spread him there.
Okay. Did you still have family up in Montana at this time?
I do. I had quite a bit of family up there at the time, uncles and cousins and that kind of stuff. Obviously, things have changed in 14 years, but
sure.
Yeah, there was. They had it set up pretty well. Okay. Again, there was a lot of organization going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so meeting you and you had a decent greeting party, I'm assuming then.
Yeah, we did. The last 3 or 4 miles, they did what they call a rolling roadblock, and there was, I don't know, 100 people or something who walked with me up the last few miles.
Wow.
Which, you think about it, again, it's the end of the journey. It's a physical relief, but it's also the end of the final journey, right? I was glad to be done with it, but now it's time.
So when you got there, and I'm assuming you had a pretty private moment with your wife and maybe other family members when you were able to spread his ashes and give it some finality, was there an emotional, finality to that at that time? Was there, what was going through your head and your heart when you spent 4 months getting there? And, for probably an event that probably took you, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes. I don't know if you said things at that point in time or, what was that like?
Well, again, it was a tremendous relief to be there physically.
Mm-hmm.
But you're kind of letting go, right? It's Kevin's last walk, right? It's the last walk you're going to take with him. And that kind of morphs into the grief discussion about one of the things I tell people all the time, and this sounds a little harsh, but it's 20/20 hindsight. So many people want to go back. The word closure, in my opinion, should be thrown out. when it comes to grief, because there really is no closure.
Sure.
There's the old you that actually died when your child died, and there's a new you.
Okay.
The new you can be a better person, or it might destroy you. Right? And I chose to not let it destroy me. And one of the things when I tell the story at schools and stuff is I talk about adversity. Bad stuff's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
It's the way you respond to it that defines your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just, when we have our own personal tragedies of losing a parent or an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent, that's a different type of loss than losing your own child. We, in many cases, we expect those things because those people are ahead of us in life, so to speak. But when you lose, one that had their whole life ahead of them, and you were the shepherd at that point in time, helping them through those things, like you said, I bet there isn't a day yet that there probably isn't a day yet that doesn't cross your mind about the loss and what you're doing with it.
That's true. And there's the best way I can describe it is it's a wound that has a scab on it.
Okay.
Except you don't know what's going to tear that scab off.
Right.
Right. It's never going to heal. But as I said, I tend to look at it as, and it took me a long time to figure out, I'm never going to feel the way I did that morning when I got that knock on the door. I'm never going to feel that way again.
Right.
And if I think I'm going to do this and it's going to make me feel like that again, it's not possible. That person's gone from your life.
Yeah. So the journey, you wrap up your personal time and spreading his ashes, and you wrap up the process there. Did you stay in town a little bit? And, what was the trip home?
Well, one of the most common questions I get asked by kids is, did I walk back?
I didn't figure you were going to do that. So I'll, because
No,
the story would have started out,
back.
it took me 8 months. All right. So no, I knew you weren't doing that.
No, I didn't stick around there very long because I'd been off of work for 4 months.
Yeah.
And they had actually, I needed to get back and get to work. So we stuck around for a couple days, but that was about it. And then we headed back.
So not to get too personal, but was that a pretty quiet ride home?
There was times when it was quiet. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that I don't think it really sank in on to me for years what I had just done.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell kids this all the time. Look at me. I'm 5'6". I'm not an athlete by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't consider myself creative.
Right.
If I can pull off something like this, imagine what you could do, right? Because there's a lot of people out there that are very creative, very gifted. I don't consider myself one of those people. And I tell kids all the time, if I can do this, imagine what you could do if you put your mind to it. Because I look back on it and it's like, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So over the past 14 years, what else have you done with this?
Well, I still tell the story all the time, and it's kind of interesting. I had kept a journal. This is back in 2007, so I did this blog, and I kept a GPS on me the whole time that kept track of my heart rate and where I was and all of that stuff, so people were following it that way. Then I got back, and what I thought I would do is just print out the blog and put it in a binder and give it to people. And luckily I have friends who are good friends, and one of them said to me, no, I don't want your binder.
Yeah, I want this in a book.
I want you to write a book.
Yeah.
And I didn't take his advice right away because I thought, I do not want another project, right?
Yeah. You just spent 4 months hiking. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really want to take on another project, but I did eventually warm to the idea, and I did write the book. And I can tell you that writing a book is much harder than walking to Montana, for me anyway.
Well, I would attest to that also because I know I haven't written one yet. I hope that's a yet statement to go. But it's a lot of work.
It is. It is, especially if you're not a writer. Because again, me writing a book, that never crossed my mind either, actually.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot about it. I actually read some books on writing, and I read Stephen King has a book on writing.
Oh, wow.
And everybody has to kind of do it their own way.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things he said in that book was, when you're in the mood to write, just write. Don't worry about where you're going to put it or how you're going to fit it. And that's kind of the attitude I had. When I felt like writing, I would sit down and write. Mm-hmm. And I would kind of just get things down on paper. And then you have to go in and sort out, does this even fit anywhere?
Right.
Right. Does this need to get drop kicked? That kind of stuff.
So how long did it take you to get through the writing the book process?
Oh, that probably took me a year.
Okay.
I would write it, and then of course all your friends and relatives, you give it to them and they go, oh yeah, that's great. And it's not great, right?
Right.
No. And I would write a revision to it today, but if I had time. But one of the things I did was, a neighbor has a book club.
Mm.
And so I printed out 12 or 13 copies of it and let them read it, and then went over there, and they all went around the room and said, oh, I really love this, I really love this, blah blah blah. I said, okay, so now we're going to go the other way.
Yeah.
I need you to tell me at least one thing that you did not like about the book, because that's what you want to hear.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Book. You want people to tell you, but what don't you like about it? And one of the gals, I'll never forget this, she goes, quite frankly, you talk more about your decisions on what kind of shoes you're going to wear than you told us about how you felt when you finished the walk. So it was that kind of feedback that I needed, right? You need somebody to, you kind of lost me with that kind of thing.
So are you still speaking today on your story? I know you say you tell.
Yeah, I actually told it. Yeah, well, COVID obviously changed that.
Sure.
And I still do it. In fact, I speak at these Mothers Against Drunk Driving has what they call a victim impact panel, where people that get arrested for DUI have to come for alcohol education. So I speak at that, and I did that this morning. And COVID has forced me to, I've done videos on the Facebook page. If you scroll down, you'll see where I've got the video. I've got a video of exactly what I say at schools now on there, along with a lesson plan, and also the faith part of it. So I broke that off into 2 separate videos. They're very, very similar, but when I speak at schools, I have to walk that line, as you are probably aware.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, there would be people who would complain about anything, and
yes,
you have to be careful about that these days, which is a sad state of our world.
But the videos are on Kevin's on the Facebook page, and they're it's about 25 minutes long ish, but I tell the exact story that I talk about in schools and stuff too. So I've done it probably, I don't know, 400, 500, 600 times. So it's pretty much the same way every time.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do you get on a lot of podcasts? Because I've had some friends. I'm going to recommend you over to some other podcasts. So you do quite a bit of this. I'm very thankful that you were able to come on and share your story with us.
Yeah, I have not. It's kind of interesting. I take inputs from people, and this guy told me, you need to get on some podcasts. And I told him, I said, well, I did internet radio back in the day, and it went nowhere. And he goes, no, it's different now. I don't listen to podcasts, but I know a lot of people do. But I'll tell you one more thing about when I tell the story. I had a younger speaker. I was talking to him one day. He goes, you don't still speak at high schools, do you? I said, well, yeah, they invite me in all the time. I tell the story. And he said, you're too old to be speaking at a high school. Which at the time I was offended. However, it got me to thinking, and the first thing I tell everybody when I walk in is, I'm not here to tell you how to live your life.
Yeah.
I'm just here to tell you a story. And I've had more than one principal and teacher say, that's the most important thing you said.
Yeah. Very much so.
Kids don't want somebody to come in and preach to them. Nobody wants to be preached to, right?
No.
Well, this is what you should do.
I know that 100%. I have 5 that are 18 through 26, and my opinion is just starting to count possibly on the 24 and 26-year-old. I'm not sure. But no, they don't. They don't want to be told what to do. They got to. I can remember my oldest son went through some personal struggles and had a lot of self-doubt and stuff. So he went off to go to play football at a college in southern Utah, and it took a lot to get to that decision point. And he said something that I'll always remember. And he said, Dad, because I asked him, I said, how did you get here? Because I drove him out there. We went out together. And I said to him, how did you get to this point where you made this decision to finally do this? And he said, Dad, sometimes you just have to do things on your own. And
yeah,
that's for sure. They just do. Wow.
Yeah, that's spot on. The other part that I say is, I'm here to tell you a story. All I want you to do is think about, what do you want your story to be? That's
really good. That's really good. I mean, if you look at the laws now, your son's blood alcohol content was 4 times DUI level.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
0.36 was compared to a 0.32 on 4 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's no wonder. Yeah, no wonder.
Yeah.
Well, you've taken the breath away from me, which is pretty hard to do. I do a lot of yapping. And as a father of 5, I think I might even just, after this is done, and pick up the phone and call all of them and remind them that I'm still here. And I try hard to do that on a regular basis. But, life is fragile. And I don't have to tell you that.
It is. Yeah. And like I said, when I say I was that guy, I was that guy. Because you never believe what will happen to you, right?
No, it's somebody else's problem.
It's somebody else's problem. That wouldn't happen in my family. No way, no how. And I'm that guy. I never believed this would ever happen to me.
So the connections out there online are Kevin's Last Walk, and then Kevin's Last Walk on Facebook too, right?
Facebook and Twitter, both, yes.
Okay. Well, I thank you for coming on and the vulnerable moments that you shared, Barry. It's quite the compelling story, and I'm assuming that through the sorrows and the heaviness of heart, there's been a lot of rewards for actually making something very good will become a reality.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been some pretty cool stories.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I thank you for sharing it with us. I know this is going to be a listener favorite because we go through all kinds of different topics and stuff. And, a lot of times it's about the individual's person, their stories about what they do. But this is a story that's even far more intimate because it's about you. It's about your son. It's about your family and the impact you're making on people's lives because of that tragedy. So I commend you for that. I think that's a great thing that you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, folks, since I'm out of breath and out of questions and emotionally drained this afternoon, I think we're going to call it an episode for this one. And don't forget to stop by our website, the Rex Andrews Show, to get links and information about Barry Adkins' story, Kevin's Last Walk. And I want to say before we wrap it up, our normal thing is be safe, be bold, and make it a great day.